Hello and welcome back to the Copa Club podcast. This will be part one of our Copa Libertadores Round of 16 run through. We'll focus on the left-hand side of the draw. And of course, I'm joined by Peter Pankovski. Peter, how are we, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, Nate. Thanks for having me again. Pleasure's all mine, really.
And of course, Callum Goodall has snuck in another holiday. So he was doing very well for himself and he keeps avoiding the podcast. I'm sure he'll join us for a future episode. But there's plenty to dive in here. I'm so excited the Libertadores is back. Finally, forget the Euros, forget Copa America. This is the tournament to get involved with. So we're going to focus on the left-hand side of the draw for this particular episode. So we will start with San Lorenzo versus Atletico Mineiro. In what looks quite a tasty looking game from this left-hand side of the draw, San Lorenzo, time of recording, don't come into this in much form. One win in their last five, but they did finish second in their group ahead of Independiente del Valle, who, look, we'll all put our hands up here. We said that they would be the team to watch, and San Lorenzo managed to do a job on them. So they did something right. The current form is off, but they do come up against Mineiro, who were wonderful in their group stage. Almost maximum points, won 5 out of the 6 games. Under Milito, I thought they were going to fight on all fronts. They've been very good in the Libertadores, admittedly coming through quite a weak group against Caracas, Rosario, and the other one which has escaped me, Peter.
Uh, Penarol, I think. Was
Penarol,
it?
that's the
Yeah.
one. That's the team. That's the team who beat them. Thanks for
Yeah.
bailing me out there. So 15 points. They did really well in the Libertadores group stage, but domestically they've been all over the shop. Really, they can't seem to keep clean sheets. So, what's your thoughts on this one, Peter? Because I was a huge fan when Milito came across from, well, not from Argentinos Juniors, but he did a wonderful job there. And they're still on track for success in the Libertadores, and I think that's a priority for them. It's about time they won one. I know Hulk is desperate to get his hands on this title. So it's a tricky little trip to Argentina, isn't it?
Yeah. Until I was just going to mention about Hulk until he gets sent off and he just goes absolutely ballistic at the camera like he always does. But no, all seriousness aside, all seriousness on point, actually. I actually think that's a fine game, like just to kick things off here, even in the podcast in particular. I just wanted to kick things off. Sole reason being is I didn't exactly share the same optimism from Elito that I would have initially had, not to discredit his work, but I feel like we talked about this before the podcast. He's a bit of a pragmatist in my end, and a pragmatist is always fine in tournaments. I don't exactly agree that Mineiro's suit a back three. I think they look a bit disjointed in it, and I think it shows because just because you don't play on a, yes, we know Brazil's schedule and everything and whatnot, but just because you don't play every single game against opponents that aren't aware of your play style to the degree that the Brazilian teams are used to, because you meet a Cruzeiro, what, like, including the regional championship games, like at least 4 times a year, at least. And then you meet other teams at least 3 or 4 with the Copa do Brazil and so on. So teams get a pretty quick kind of picture of how you intend to shape up and look in certain games. And as such, I feel kind of the Milito style, the back three, the front two with Hulk and Paulinho being there, the midfield being shaped up, Scarpa being moved on the left hand side a little bit, whatnot. I don't think it suits Mineiro to the degree that I want it to suit a side that has this explosive offensive power as they do. And obviously, hindsight, they now signed Davison, so all the problems are going to go away. They start scoring even more goals. But jokes aside, I feel it just doesn't fit. Like I know he's trying to shape things up, and recently he's kind of moved to a 4-4-2 and so on. But he seems hell bent on playing this front two, and I just don't think maybe that's why they signed Davison, because they didn't have a consistent out and out like regular top tier striker. So, and when you throw it back to San Lorenzo, you mentioned about the bad form. Granted, I haven't watched as much of San Lorenzo as I do of Mineiro, but if these two teams kind of clash in terms of ups and downs and ups and downs, and as such, it makes exactly that for a tasty game. It it's exactly the Libertadores in all its shine and glory, is it not? Because if someone gives you like a proper prediction right now for this, everybody will probably go for Mineiro, yes, but like a proper prediction of how it's gonna go, I don't think you'd have a clear picture. Do you?
No, I think the fact that I think this is perfect in the fact that this is for the neutral in terms of that it's in Argentina first and foremost because Mineiro haven't been able to keep a clean sheet. They've been, like you said, I'm glad you brought up their back three. They've been and ahhing and tossing and turning as to what formation to play defensively, and they've just been leaking goals. I don't think they've had more than one or two clean sheets throughout all competitions in 2024, which is a major concern for me. And I don't know why they haven't gone with, because in the Libertadores they did it, and yes, they were playing weaker opponents, but they went with Scarpa right wing mainly at times, Paulinho and Hulk across that front three, and just let them do what they want, interchanging. It worked perfectly. That's when they started scoring the most amount of goals. I think Gustavo Scarpa has been the key addition for Brazil, for Mineiro in Brazil rather, and that's why they've been so prolific. But they haven't come across anybody yet who's a little bit more rigid. San Lorenzo play with a 4-2-3-1 formation, and look, they knocked out Independiente de Valle, who play a similar style to Mineiro, where they like to try and get wingers wide, cut in, and San Lorenzo stifled them quite comfortably at home. It was a different story in Ecuador, but we know about the altitude there and the heat. But San Lorenzo did a job on Independiente de Valle, and with Mineiro not being able to keep clean sheets, this is the beauty of two-legged affairs for Brazilian teams, because if they get themselves in trouble in the first leg, I can see San Lorenzo coming out on top here. I really can. But I think Mineiro back at home will get over the line. I've just not been as convinced. When we did the last podcast around the Libertadores, I was thinking Mineiro's. I think Mineiro and Botafogo were the two teams I was hot on. But under Milito, they've not really impressed me. It's just going forward, I think they're okay. But defensively, like you said, three at the back, four at the back, a lack of consistency. And with a Brazilian schedule playing every 2 or 3 days, you can't keep switching from 3 to 4. What's going to work? You almost need to push through the barrier and find a system which players will be happy with. So I don't know, to be honest with you. So we've opened up the podcast with a game where
I was
I'm
just
not
going to
sure.
mention, just to cut you off there for a second, I was just going to mention that apart from Davison, obviously they did now brought in, I think it was Lianco from Southampton, the Brazilian centre back. So that's okay, somewhat addressing the defense. I think he was on loan in Saudi Arabia. I don't know what his level is now. He wasn't exactly a shining light in the Premier League, but the jump from the Premier League back to Brazil is obviously good enough. And
Of
then
course.
they've also, I think, acquired Bernard from Panathinaikos. I think he's come back to Brazil. I'm pretty sure he's come back to
Yeah.
Brazil, but
No, you're right.
and like those, and then you add Davison to that mix. It's kind of, I hope that this is a move where they target a little bit of experience in order to exactly bring a little bit more balance, a little bit more seriousness in a sense into that side, because that might help. It might. I don't know obviously whether it will stop help them whether it will help them stop leaking goals, because that's very debatable on numerous like things that have to be taken into account there. But in terms of the experience, you never could lack experience. Like, it's better off to have it. And some of these guys, I think Lank was what, 28 to 27. Bernard is over 30 now. Davison is a classic at this point. It just helps to have them, and it might shape up the team a little bit more.
There's a
At
good
least
level
at
of
least from a
experience.
mental perspective, that's what I mean.
Definitely, and I think that's what Mineiro have lacked in this tournament, and why they've not been able to. I mean, they've bumped into Palmeiras and got knocked out by Palmeiras the last 3 occasions, and they're on the other side of the draw. When we actually look at who is on this draw, who's dangerous, and we'll talk about the other teams, this is Mineiro's chance to reach a final. It really is. So, look, I think over 2 legs they will have enough, but that trip to face San Lorenzo in Argentina is not going to be fun for Milito. It's a case of getting out there, worst case scenario, a goal down. I think they'll be able to
Yeah.
overturn that. I think they've got too much attacking quality, but they haven't been tested yet in the Libertadores. I think it's easy to look at this and say, like, they scored for fun in the group stage, but this will be a tough test for them. So, really interesting. Let's move across to the next fixture, because I actually think this is this is a cracking game between Gremio and Fluminense, which I didn't think I'd be saying if you asked me this 4 or 5 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
absolutely.
And now, for some context for potentially people who don't know too much about what's been happening with Gremio this season, now there was horrendous floods in the south of Brazil where not only did people lose their homes and lives were lost, etc., but Fluminense also lost their stadium, training ground, and had to pick up the sticks and move across. And even before all this happened, they lost the likes of Luis Suarez, who carried them into the Libertadores last season. So it was a rebuilding job before this disaster. However, they've pulled themselves together in recent weeks. They've actually looked quite impressive. They've got to the knockout stage of the Libertadores, which is a huge win for them, considering everything they've gone through over the last 4-8 week period. And they come up against Fluminense, who were rubbish in the end under Fernando Diniz. But now, under Mano Menezes, they're looking strong. He's built them into a team who know how to win. I think I've put it on my notes here somewhere. There's so many notes for this particular podcast. But since he's come in, all 4 wins for Menezes at the time of recording have been 1-0. He's only lost a couple of games, and the first one was when he came in against Fortaleza away, who have the best record in Brazil at the moment at home, and they're flying. They're doing incredibly well, and I expect them to go far in the Sudamericana. So it's 2 teams coming against each other who are peaking when out of nowhere they really shouldn't be. Peter, how do you see these 2 legs unfolding? Because I'm scratching my head as much as the first one.
Now this is the same. I think it's going to be exciting just for the fact that it's absolute chaos on both sides when you think about it. As in, yes, now it's being stabilized, but at any point if it booms up again and you see like a serious bad patch of form or something like that, you'd not be surprised. At least if you're a regular watcher of South American football. No disrespect to anybody who doesn't watch it on a regular basis. It's You said it very correct. Like Gremio are in such a rebuild phase right now that I would have actually tipped them more for a relegation battle rather than the way they've picked things up now and just started grinding out results and looking much better. And I think we do have to give props where it's due. A lot of that actually has come from Gustavo Nunes, who to me, I think quietly with Gabriel Mek that we've mentioned in the previous pod, and then the fact that like Gremio brought in Soteldo and others, Diego Costa as well. Yes, obviously he's not a winger, but I'm speaking that spark offensively was not expected to come from a youth player that prior to that didn't have a lot of minutes in his belt at senior level, and I think quietly that's galvanized a whole lot of the other part of the squad, at least offensively speaking. Like I know they've brought in now Matias Cerezo and so on. They're trying to get depth in Martin Braithwaite as well, which was one of those
Yeah,
one of those moves in Brazil that you just go, what? Like, what am I seeing here? But beauty of
yeah.
Brazil again.
I
And
think
then
it's a good signing because
no,
Diego
I
Costa
think he's a
hasn't worked
great
out.
signing,
Yeah,
obviously. But anybody would could have told you Diego Costa was likely not going to work out because at this point
yeah,
he's just a part-time footballer, really. And I love Diego Costa. He's associated with Chelsea, but you get, and I have to throw that out, but you get what I mean. He's just not himself at this point. At this point, he's just a depth piece at best. And if he has a good game, he has a good game. That's it. And then to flip it over to Fluminense, it was just, I think there's a combination of things here. I think Andre coming back was number one for sure because I think he's such a. I'm still shocked he's not moved across to anywhere. And I think at this point in
we
the
move
summer,
on. We can't talk
he'll
about it.
probably. I'll just think. All I'm saying is I think he'll probably stay. And then
Yeah,
even if he prolongs his stay in Brazil, I think it wouldn't be too bad for him. And then obviously Fernando Diniz been sacked and then replaced with Mano Menezes, who's again another very pragmatic coach, another direct coach. I think that in itself helped just to stabilize a very disjointed squad because they did look like obviously, I'm sorry, but absolutely atrocious. Like just the whole scheme when things fell apart for Denise, it was just bad. It was terrible. It had to happen. It was inevitable.
it wasn't just the wheels which came off; everything came off. It
Everything like
was
the whole car broke down 50 kilometers from where you're actually supposed to arrive. Like one wheel's on the side road, the other's on the other side of the road.
hmm,
Anyways, And then obviously added to those two came in Thiago Silva, who again we talked about it before the podcast. I think he just when it comes to galvanizing a squad, Thiago Silva is an emblem, an icon of Brazilian football at this rate. And I I barely see if anybody that actually hates him. Like maybe he's not. He had like a, I wouldn't say poor end to his Chelsea career, but at 38, you don't expect a player to be absolutely amazing at like the Premier League level that
No, but
everybody
for
wants it to be.
the level he's come in, he's just like you said,
He's been
all
unreal. He's been
all
unreal.
all four wins, 1-0, and I couldn't honestly see Fluminense keeping a clean sheet at all. But as you said, it's that whole spine really. If we look at it from Thiago Silva's come in, Andre's come back, John Arias has come back from Colombia with Copa America, and he's come back and he's looked more like himself. Even everyone gets dragged down, don't they, when they're in the dirt? But John Arias has come back and he's been like, oh, thank God, Thiago Silva's at the back. Andre's going to pick me out. But whilst we're talking about Flu, we're going to address two players.
We forgot someone, yes.
We're going to address two players who people should definitely be keeping an eye on. And I've been tweeting about him for the last few games because it's just been unbelievable. Peter's been acknowledging him for a long period of time. So we'll stick with Fluminense and then we'll go back to Gremio before a quick prediction. But Kaua Elias, what a player. What a player. He's almost pushed John Kennedy aside. I'll just say for a second that John Kennedy has ruined his career. He's just from his off-field behaviour. He would have already been in Europe, probably one of the best finishes in Brazil in the last couple of years, hands down. But Elias has come in and 5 goals in his last 8 games at the time of recording. His movement in the box, super clever. His finish against Juventude, yes, they got knocked out, but clever little back heel from close range, wanted to get the ball again. Just a fox in the box, as cheesy as it is. He's just been fantastic to watch. And for me, it's been his movement, where you're like, he's going to the next level. Peter, you can have the floor for a couple of minutes because I know you're desperate to talk about this kid.
Well, I've known him for I think it was well just to give proper props because I do admit that I wasn't actually discovering him the way I usually like watch just random youth games in Brazil. There's a page on Twitter for anybody who doesn't know. It's Brasileirao for foreigners. I don't know the actual at, but he's a great guy. He's a Fluminense fan, and he consistently messages me about like youth players from Fluminense. The one play he did mention, I think it was a year and a half ago to two. He did mention Kaua Elias and just said, "Look at this kid. He's an amazing finisher." I did look at him, and by God, this kid has every single finish in his locker. Like I can't even put it into words how good of a finisher this kid is. And now that he's just like bursting onto senior level, and you're seeing everything, not just the finishing, the whole package. Like he's built up for senior football. He's not a kid. He's not a scrawny, scruffy kid that you see that needs time. Like, and this is no disrespect to say someone like Gabriel Meck, but or Esteval even, because they are not like built up. Kaua Elias is 18. He's built like a 21 to 22-year-old. And he's got everything. Like he's got physique, he's got finishing, he's got elegance, the way he moves. As you said, just in the box, the awareness, the prowess, the movement in behind at certain times, and then just pulling certain defenders out of the positions. What more do you need from a striker? Do you need anything? Everybody's saying Vitor Roque is bad for some reason because Barcelona have just, I'm sorry, but have just treated him like absolute dirt. And he, I think, netted what? I think it was 30 goals. Honestly, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe it was 19. I don't know why in my head I have 31 to 19. Anyways, maybe it was 31 apps, 19 goals. I honestly think this kid will easily surpass this. Like, easily. Easily. Yes, the two are completely different in terms of way of play, but easily.
I
Easily.
think the best thing to address here is the fact that he hasn't come into Denise's Fluminense side who were hammering, like smashing it all across the Libertadores last season. He's literally dragged them out. Well, I think he may still be in the relegation zone, but he's dragged them out of like last place. Whilst Flu have been winning 1-0, it's been Elias's name on the score sheet, and he's the one who's been coming on. He's now starting games, obviously, because they need a goal scorer. Herman Cano, who we predicted wouldn't have a good season after, bless him, his tired legs after last year. He deserves a year off. But John Kennedy's behaviour off the pitch has ruined his footballing career. but he's been coming on in 20, 30 minutes and scoring. And a lot of his goals have been in the last 10 minutes because he's been so eager. I keep mentioning his movement, but it's been
Yeah.
so impressive. And he could be the difference to get past Gremio if Fluminense do. Before we wrap up who we think is going to win, because we could talk about Elias all day. I think he's so good. But Gremio have a tricky little young winger themselves in Gustavo, Nunes, 18, and dare I say it, burst onto the scene. These Brazilians they just come out of nowhere, don't they? And this guy it's become a perfect time for Gremio, who have like had all their front three gone and replaced. They've struggled with obviously the off-field stuff which we talked about, but goals, assists, direct, confident, happy to cut in, shoot, go down the channel, find a teammate. He's really creative, unpredictable. I'm pulling out all the buzzwords here for a winger. But 18, like there's already been a few links to the Premier League or Europe, and like as soon as that happens with a good team, with a good player in Brazil, of course they're going to get linked. But you can see if he's thrown into the gym for 6 to 12 months, there's a player who's probably ready for a European sort of career. Peter, have you been impressed with Nunes, or is that a bit of an obvious one?
I did mention him just a couple of minutes ago, but no, I'm not impressed. But no, when in 2024 alone, I don't think I'm not sure, I'm pretty certain he didn't have a senior appearance prior to that. When in 2024 alone, you now have over 30 appearances in Brazil at 18, it just speaks about the level of talent and the level of appreciation the coaching staff have for him and just the impact he's had. Because, as I said, to me, a large portion of the actual galvanization and good form of the squad right now is down to him, and I wouldn't be doing him any discredit to say that to me he's just head and shoulders above every single Gremio player right now in terms of ability and impact of the side. Because God knows, and I certainly hope this doesn't happen, but if he goes down with an injury or just absent for the squad, I think it's massively weakened, and that is a lot of kind of responsibility to put on the shoulders of an 18-year-old kid, but he's just that good. And I'm not surprised he's linked to the Premier League, honestly, especially when you see like a host of these teams kind of trying to pip every single one to the next big thing, even at youth level. So him playing at senior level right now, probably just the only issue at hand is for the big boys at hand is just that the price tag is probably higher, and they'll have to chip out a bit more in actual fee rather than just add-ons and so on. So Nunes is a player and a half. Like at some point, I started contemplating which one do I prefer. Like, is it Gustavo Nunes or is it Wesley? Because the two kind of there's a debate to be had. There's definitely
Definitely.
a debate.
I'm glad you brought that up. I know you spoke about Nunes earlier, and you moved across to Flu too much, and I wanted to have a little bit more on him. But I agree with what you're saying there. Before we change this podcast into something else, I think it's worth saying that we're all getting caught up in Wesley and the Wesley hype, and the Wesley hype is real. It is there, and there is definitely a player to be moulded. But Nunes' stats are far superior in should I say equally bad team? I don't know, because Corinthians
Yeah,
and Gremio
I'd
both haven't
agree.
been doing too good.
I'd
So
agree completely.
honestly, if you were to say right now, which player would you like to come to your club? I would probably say towards Nunes. Honestly, I think that's where I'd be going. But this is not a transfer podcast. We're going to go back to the Libertadores before we move across to the last couple of games. Try and keep the next ones a little bit short and sweet.
Any
Gremio,
predictions though?
Gremio
I was good.
Fluminense. I'm gonna back Fluminense. I just think over 2 legs at the Maracanã they'll have a bit too much. I think Andre will stay. I think they'll go through. I reckon they can easily beat Mineiro or San Lorenzo in the next round. And all of a sudden here,
Yeah.
the champions who we were talking about saying before, like they aren't going to hold on to the title, and there's still lots of hoops to get through, but they're on a very
Yeah.
generous side of the draw. I can see Fluminense easily get into the semi-finals here, and I can't believe I'm saying that, considering they're still trying to keep their heads above water in Serie A. Peter, your thoughts?
I am not optimistic as much about Fluid making the final just because I feel like it's hard to keep grinding out tough wins. That's one of the
Semi-finals. I said,
okay, fair enough.
not
But
final,
still,
not final.
yeah, okay, fair enough. But still, as I mentioned, it's just tough for me to see the side kind of maintaining that. And if they don't start firing a little bit more offensively, then that will be a struggle for them. But I do agree that I'll probably back them against Gremio just because Gremio, for me, yes, they've brought in Martin Braithwaite, as I mentioned, but I feel like they're still kind of inconsistent and they'd rather avoid something again happening in this area, again pointing out to their previous relegation rather than something else. So I feel they won't chalk it off. Obviously, nobody chalks off the Libertadores once you make the stage of 16. But I'm just saying that I feel it will be a little bit too much on their legs, as we said, over the course of two legs, and I'll probably back Flu as well.
Next up, Talares versus River Plate, who shared a really entertaining 2-2 draw the last time these two met. River Plate no longer have Martin Di Michelis in charge, as Marcelo Gallardo has made his return to the hot seat at River Plate, which has definitely got fans excited. Under Di Michelis, it was heading the way of Denise. It was all going a bit sour, winless on the road in 7. But there's not a lot to like at Talares at the moment either. They've winless in 4 at the moment. Yes, they've got a game at the weekend against Barracas Central before they play against River. But everything's around Ramon Sousa at the moment because he was meant to be sold. Well, I think earlier in the window, Chelsea were looking at him. Wolves got quite close. Forest got incredibly close. Sousa wasn't playing, training on his own. And now all of a sudden he's been told that he will potentially be involved at the weekend and against River because they need him in order to get through in the Libertadores. But this is someone who hasn't played much football. Not sure where his mindset's going to be. And I think the return of Marcelo Gallardo is just going to give River that boost. And again, this isn't one-legged affair. It's over 2 legs. And they have to go back to El Monumental, which will be one of Gallardo's first games back. And I just see it going in the way of Gallardo, to be honest. And look, it almost feels like a fairy tale story. I think Denise and flew as fairy tale last season. El Monumental will hold the final this year. Gallardo's come back to pick River Plate up. It all seems to be right in the headlines, doesn't it? It's going that way. I
Now
don't
you
think
got
this.
me. You got me getting what was it, chills a little bit. Come on now.
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be good. I don't think this game is going to be a classic. I think the first leg's got draw written all over it, but similar to the other games, I think River will have enough to sneak through. I can't not mention Franco Mastantuano at the age of 16, pulling the strings in behind Miguel Boya, who seems to have found some form again, and he'll want to impress Gallardo, who almost dropped him for Lucas Beltran at the time, but he is the number 9 for River at the moment. So I think if River can survive this first leg, then I think they'll be breezing through to the quarterfinals. Peter, over to you.
Just fun fact: the moment I see Talares starting on a regular basis, Matias Galarza, I love it. It takes me back to Vasco da Gama's Serie B days. But but honestly, I think with regards to River is more where I have an opinion, to be honest, and it's largely due to the fact that obviously Gallardo's coming back, and the very emblematic coach. I know River fans have this saying of the 3 Gs in terms of how they play, but I can't tell the Spanish words for it. But like a lot of them joke that they could have added a 4 just because of Gallardo. So that tells you all you need to know when he's literally going to, well, not literally, but could be engraved into River's emblematic quote there. So, and I feel like they don't actually have, at least offensively, they don't have a poor squad. Like you look at names just off the back of your mind. Like you look at big names like Pity Martinez and Manuel Lanzini, and you mentioned Borja as well. And then you got youngsters like Mastantuono, I'm probably going to butcher his name, and then Echeverri as well being
It's a
there.
mouthful.
And you honestly look at that and think, oh, there's a fantastic team in there, and it's just about, again, I feel like this podcast I'm using this word all the time, but it's just about galvanizing that squad, and who better to do it than someone who's had so much success? It's kind of you mentioned it very correct. Like it's almost set up for him to actually come back like this knight on a shiny horse and just come in and just waltz in, break the doors down, and
Yeah.
then boom, reaches the final at the Monumental, and then maybe win it. And all of a sudden, we all tipped. Independiente del Valle to be the team to watch out for, and River were actually the poor side. And granted, they still, I don't think, haven't kind of shaped up very well, but it will take time. Like this is not someone like as much as Gallardo is Gallardo, he's not going to just wave a magic wand and just make everything great again. But
Yeah. But that's the beauty of the Libertadores,
yeah,
right? That it's over the next few months. If he gets through against Talleres here, has another month behind him, and they might even be looking at like what's happened with Flu and Denise to be like getting that new manager bounce, as cheesy as that is, may just work for them. And do you know what? I think it will be incredibly refreshing for a Brazilian team not to win the Libertadores. And I
yeah, that's
think
true.
it is going to be on River in order to change that or break that. So I think we're very much siding with River here. Let's conclude the last match on this side of the draw before we park part one. And Colo Colo versus Junior. Not the most glamorous of fixtures, but both teams will fancy their chances to get through, whether they will have to face River in the quarterfinals. Reaching the quarterfinals will be a success for both. However, Colo Colo, again, a team, if they do qualify, they squeeze through. They always struggle to score goals. 4 goals in the group stage has got them through, which is incredibly surprising. And I think it doesn't say too much about their group. But the manager, well, if we're talking about River, we're going to go straight to Boca because Boca's ex-manager, Jorge Almiron, a man who knows how to fluke away to the final, as we saw last year, didn't win a single knockout game and managed to get to the final. Now, I'm not saying Colo Colo are going to be the team to do that, but that's something to go on. And Junior, their opponents. Now, they topped a group with Botafogo in, so outside in, you could be looking at that thinking, okay, potential dark horses. Well, I'm going to flatten that from the very beginning because Carlos Bacca, age 37, up top. Again, he's hit double digits again. But in the Libertadores, over time, I don't think that's going to pay off. And the only reason why they topped that group was before Arthur Jorge came in for Botafogo, beat them 3-1 in the first game of the Libertadores. And they were a disgrace in that tournament. Absolute disgrace in that first game, sorry. And it gifted them 3 points and it put Botafogo on the back foot immediately because it's the home games you need to win in order to finish in first place. They also got quite lucky against Universitario, drew 1-0 in Peru with 1 shot on target. And again, 1 or 2 shots on target when they beat Liga de Quito away from home, which was admittedly a good result. But if you look at the stats and if you look at the game, it was a breakaway goal where the Ecuadorian team had so many errors at the back and it just fell into their hands. So there's always one team who's fortunate to be at this stage of the tournament. I think that applies to Colo Colo, and I think it applies to Junior as well. Colo coming through an incredibly weak draw. So I think it's safe to say whoever comes out of this fixture will probably be knocked out by River in the next round if it is to be River. A lot of negativity from me, and I hate to park a podcast on a lot of negativity, but have you got anything to say about this particular fixture, Peter?
Not a lot, to be honest with you, but not because anything else. I just feel you've kind of covered all bases. I don't think if anybody would probably, and this it will sound very disrespectful, but if anybody wants to probably skip a Libertadores game, is going to be this one really because it's just not because of anything else, but I wouldn't want to call it boring, but it's just first of all the unpredictability of it all, as you said, but also the level of the two sides doesn't feel exactly at the top of the kind of South American level in a sense. It's kind of yes, okay, Colo Colo probably will take my backing in a sense, just because of I feel like they have the better names just on paper because you look at the side with Guillermo Paiva, with Carlos Palacios, I believe, and also Arturo Vidal as well. You kind of think they'd edge it out just because, yes, on the other side you have Carlos back at 37, but it's just Libertadores is a different beast. Like you expect someone to just kind of take care of him a better way, especially given the level of Argentina of Chile compared to Colombia. Although that, in a sense, is kind of debatable as well. But to me, it's hard. I would even get like I would struggle to give you a proper prediction who's going to edge it out. Probably, as I said, Colo Colo, but
I think Colo Colo are one of
I'm
those
not
teams.
exactly.
If you look at Colo Colo, if you one of the teams who have 25 shots a game and 2 are on target and 14 corners and constantly look out of ideas, and I think that's exactly what could happen in this particular game. And I think Junior taking it back to Colombia, I think that's where they'll have the edge, especially in the heat and the conditions there. I don't want to finish I don't want to finish any podcast on a negative. So if there's a player to keep an eye on, if you are against us and you think, no, I do want to watch Colo Colo versus Junior, obviously we're going to try and get people to watch as much South American football as possible. But Callum, in his absence, even though I hate that he's still going on holiday, he has said on the podcast previously, Vicente Pizarro, 21 years of
Yeah,
age, centre midfielder who operates as the number 8 as well. He's come back from like quite a long-term injury over the last 18 months. And this season he started to finally play more than like 10, 15 games. Now, he's a creative left footer who just knows how to position his body for little dinks into the box, crosses, operating on the 18-yard box. I think his overall figures can be slightly better, but he has started arriving into the box of late, knows how to just pass a ball into a net. There's always that calm person at a five-a-side game who just likes to roll the ball into the back of the net. And that is Vicente Pizarro. I think he is better than Chilean football from what I've seen. Not sure if that's going to move out of the continent, but a move across to Argentina or Brazil, definitely on the table. Callum Goodall, if Cal gives me a recommendation to look at a player, I normally do. And I've been looking at Pizarro, and I think he is a wonderful little player, but I'm not sure if he's going to be Colo Colo's saviour. And that is a wrap for part 1. We'll return for part 2 with Natalia Tavares and Peter Pankovski, so keep an eye on that. But please do subscribe to the podcast across any platform you do like, and stay safe.